He pops in. Oh, and you yell. You can stand right there like that, like we have a seat. Thank you for joining us.
See you everywhere. Thank you.
My coworker, Meg, his name, yeah, I do work with that new fellow.
Nick.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Staff over in the library, very clever.
Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah, of course, when he comes back, but actually helping somebody else out of it up there. Yeah, after that, you can tell us something.
Appreciate it.
Great. Oh, cool. I did. We'll all definitely enjoy these chapters. But they're trying to choose the good ones. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I don't see anything. Did I give him a quick nudge? Oh, he's in the waiting room. He's in the waiting room.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Welcome.
Good afternoon.
I know it's no longer morning.
Just a few minutes.
Is the volume okay? Please, continue.
How are you doing, Abdullah?
Doing good, doing good. You know, I'm actually in Houston this week, so it was very, very hot yesterday. It was like close to 90 the last couple days, and then it rained, and so now it's a more reasonable. So better than the real fall we're getting in New York, but it was a little too hot for the first couple days here.
Rain is good. Rain is always good. We're so glad to have you.
Always happy to, help out when it comes to anything in the CUNY system.
So we are waiting for Dr. Brown to come in, but once he does, it's okay. We can wait for him. But in the meantime, we can maybe share a little bit about you and introduce you to our students who are coming in slowly, but they're surely coming in.
Sure. You want to wait a few minutes just so that we don't like we can just wait like 2 or 3 minutes and then start once maybe five after.
Yeah, maybe we'll give it to 12:20 and then we'll
Okay.
see. My name is Selma, by the way. Let me see if I can peek in for a second. I've been the one emailing you
Yep.
back.
Yep. I recognized you without having met before.
That's being over there. So happy to have you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll give it a couple minutes. I'll reach out to Dr. Brown.
Sounds good. We'll just chill for a couple minutes. I'll just turn off camera just for a couple minutes here, just so I'm not a big head on the screen.
I'm trying to, oh, thank you. Great. I said, thank you, grab the snack. I was avoiding it because I wasn't sure if you were going to be munching while he speaks, but I think now that we're waiting, you guys can all get something. Please help yourself.
All right, well, I can start with a quick intro, like you said, Sadwa. My name is Abdullah. I actually am from Michigan originally, born and raised. My parents were from Syria originally. I grew up in Michigan. I went to the University of Michigan, and I've lived actually all over the country in my nearly 30 years of tech career. I've lived in Phoenix, I've lived in Seattle, I've lived in Boston, and I currently split my time between New York and Detroit. My mom still lives in Detroit. My in-laws still live in Detroit. Many of my siblings still live in Detroit, cousins, etc. Although I do have family in the city, one of my sons is working in the city as a software engineer as well. And I have a niece who goes to Barnard, and I have many, many connections, by the way. A sister who went to NYU, a brother-in-law went to Columbia, just lots and lots of connections in the city. Yeah, for the last 7 years, I've been working at LinkedIn. For those who don't know, our office is in the Empire State Building. We're the single largest company in the Empire State Building, so that's a cool place to be based out of in Midtown. From the time I joined LinkedIn 7 years ago, I got involved with the tech talent pipeline. I've done mentorship, I've done mock interviews, I've done special internships. And then starting in 2019, I got involved in what they call it used to be called the Tech in Residence Corps. It became called the Practitioners in Residence Corps. Basically, it's a method for people like me in the industry to teach in college. So I've been teaching a class on and off at City College for the last 6 years. I'm currently teaching that class. It's called Topics in Modern Software Engineering. Essentially, it's the same thing we teach new software engineers coming out of college, how to work in LinkedIn or in the industry. And so it's that I've been teaching that class for a while. And so yeah, I'm always happy to volunteer and get involved in a variety of opportunities. So when Ted, who just walked in, asked me if I was interested in doing this, I said, yeah, I'd be happy to, even though I'll be traveling that week.
You're terrific. He is very, as you can tell, he worked a lot. Huge time. I just got here because I gave tests
All I did was a quick intro.
for yourself.
That's what Sudwa asked me to do. So I just did a quick intro for myself, correct. So you can feel free to go ahead and introduce the talk itself.
Yeah. What is your job?
Oh, thank you. By the way, if you're facing away from me, the mic doesn't pick up the noise. You gotta make sure and face towards me when you're talking. Otherwise, I don't hear anything. So at LinkedIn, I've had a few different roles in the 7 years I've been there. I worked in the ads for the first 4 years. I worked in the main app for about a year. And the last 3 years, 2.5 years or so, I've been working on what's called productivity engineering. So essentially, a lot of the internal technology that is used by all 30,000 LinkedIn employees globally, whether that's things like third-party software like Zoom or Teams, whether that's or Google Drive or anything, a whole bunch of homegrown software as well. It's used for internal productivity. And in the most recent year, of course, that's become a big part of responsibility when it comes to generative AI. So I'm responsible for like a lot of both internal homegrown as well as adoption of. We have a company called Glean, which is a startup. That's our main productivity tool for generative AI. We also use Microsoft Copilot to a certain extent. We also use ChatGPT to a certain extent. We also use Gemini to a certain extent. So, different parts of LinkedIn using different things. We have broad solutions for everybody, and then we have specific solutions as required for specific departments and stuff like that. And so that's where I've been spending the majority of my time lately is on making sure that this new era of AI technology is actually useful and productive within the LinkedIn employee base of 30,000 globally.
You find it is. In what ways?
In what ways is it productive? So it's interesting because the the world of AI is not something new, right? People have talked about AI for a long time. I don't even like the word AI because it's not really artificial intelligence, right? It's like I remember, maybe 10, 15 years ago where, simple pattern matching software suddenly became machine learning, right? So machine learning, all it is pattern matching, whether you're pattern matching on numbers, on text, on images, on it's all about taking the next level of pattern matching. You feed something 10 million of something, it can generate a derivative version of that thing, etc. And so that's all it is. And so like if someone, for example, is a call center representative and they have to do, let's say, 100 calls a day where they're talking to customers of LinkedIn about various support things, whether those are like ad customers, premium customers, recruiting customers, etc. Well, if they're doing a call like every 5 or 10 minutes, and those calls have a bunch of repetitive patterns where customers are asking about things, we can then take that information, feed it into a model, and say, hey, give people web content or chat capabilities or interactive voice experiences that then save them from having to talk to a human. So why talk to a human if a machine of some sort, whether it's in chat or whether it's on the voice, can give you an answer much faster and much more accurately, right? Because again, it's not that we don't need humans, it's humans should be reserved for the more complex work that's not just such a repetitive task, right? So really, whether it comes to our trust and safety people who review content on LinkedIn, when it comes to our customer service people, when it comes to our internal support, like for example, as a LinkedIn employee, I get a laptop, I get a phone, I have all kinds of software, I have to make it work. Again, lots and lots of repetitive tasks there. How can we leverage the current generation of AI or machine learning to make the automated tasks, be automated, for that matter, the repetitive tasks be automated? I'm sorry, the audio is not picking you up, Ted.
Is it, you have a group and do they go around and individually talk to people or they talk, I mean, employees or they hold forums?
Yeah, so we think the way we think about it is twofold, right? Number one, we do surveys of employees to ask them, what's going well, what's not going well with the tools we're providing. We keep an eye on like what's going on in the industry so we can offer things. But really, the biggest source of work when it comes to supporting our fellow employees with all kinds of software and hardware and in office and virtual tools is support tickets, right? People file a support ticket, and so that gives us a huge data set where people can, take a look at those support tickets and say, what's creating support tickets today, right? It could be something different today from tomorrow. Like for example, the new version of Mac just came out, right? And as a CUNY employee, I got an email from the InfoSec department saying, don't upgrade your Mac right away because if you upgrade your Mac, you're opening it up to vulnerabilities. We still need to test it with college systems, et cetera, right? And so I also got a similar email from my LinkedIn, department that supports computers and whatnot, right? And so it's looking for data that says where are people spending time ineffectively? Where are people spending time in repetitive work? Where are people spending time, worrying about, security threats, people compromising their computers or compromising their email or compromising whatever? And then we use that data set to say, how do we protect people? How do we give them automation? How do we give them the tools they need to be really effective, really fast, and not have to have a human waiting around supporting for them as much as I mean, as little, like again, we'll always have humans supporting things, but the question is having them do the really complex work rather than spending time on repetitive work.
We're not against repetitive work to a certain point. But the, how, I'm going to go in two different directions, but how many people are hired by LinkedIn are software engineers that developing software?
Yeah, so software productivity is just like another role, like any other productivity, right? So as I said, we have about 30,000 employees globally. Around 8,000 or so are software engineers. And so it's a good number. We are trying to both give them the same efficiency gains as, like, again, there's efficiency gains we can do for everybody. We can do things when it comes to laptops or different software or password resets or all of that stuff that everybody uses. And then there's role specific things. So for software engineers, being able to write code more effectively. Again, there is a whole generation of coding tools right now. But one really important factor, like I recently spoke at a company all hands that we have with all the employees, attending and watching globally, and I emphasize to people, if you write a document using AI, or if you write code using AI, and then you check that in or you share that document with others, you are responsible for what you shared or what you checked in, right? And even for my students, when I'm teaching at City College, I tell them, look, there's nothing wrong with using AI to try to help you come up with ideas or whatnot. But ultimately, when you turn in a paper, it better, be your original thinking and your original writing. Even if you helped formulate it with AI, that's fine. But it better not be just pure content that you generated that's easily anybody can generate with a single prompt, right? We want original thinking, we want original coding, and so you're responsible to use that tool, just like if you're taking a math class and you're using a calculator, sure, you can generally assume a calculator is right, but if you plugged in the wrong formula, then you might come up with the wrong result, right? So you're ultimately responsible for what you put in and out of the system. And when it comes to whether work or teaching or whatnot, it's all like the accountability of the person running the machine as opposed to the machine itself.
Verizon, and Verizon almost calls themselves a software company.
Sure.
They're a phone company. They develop lots of software. Bloomberg also has developed their own software.
Yeah.
Of these 8,000 employees that are computer engineers, software engineers, are they developing? Are they working? And they need to know AI to help develop the software.
Yeah, this is where the world has shifted, right? So until about a year or two ago, we had a specialist role called a machine learning engineer. We still have those people, right? So those people needed to know the nitty gritty of using AI. They need to know, okay, for this particular type of problem, I need a random forest model. I need to apply this math. I need to run this pattern. I need to train the model. I need to test the model. I need to do lots and lots of experimentation. And so LinkedIn as a company, we've always invested in this heavily. We've always been, because what is LinkedIn? It's data, right? We have a billion members, 1.2 billion members globally. We have all the data that those members want to share about their profile as they chat with each other, as they're, posting on the feed, et cetera, right? And so like LinkedIn has always been a data company. We've always used, our data in an effective way to help people find economic opportunities, education opportunities, et cetera. The difference is now that this stuff has become no longer only restricted to people with specialized knowledge. Everybody can interact with a large language model. That really that's been the breakthrough. It's not that the models had a breakthrough in some significant way. It's the human interaction aspect of it that became the breakthrough. So, older models, you'd have a really sophisticated model, but then to communicate with humans, you'd have to have some kind of UI built by engineers, and there was a back and forth. Now, the actual models are, inherently built based on human communication, whether that's, generating text, whether that's having a conversational type of chat experience, whether that's generating images, generating videos, et cetera, et cetera. And so now it's become kind of part of the expectation of every role going forward. Now, just to tell a little quick story. So as I said, I'm from Michigan originally. I actually grew up in the city of Flint, Michigan. So Flint, Michigan's been famous in recent years. Unfortunately, it was famous for bad water for a little while, where the local water was killing people. But long before that, it was famous because back in the 70s and the 80s, when I was, born and then a little kid, it was by far the largest auto manufacturing city in the world. Every, the biggest car company in the world in those days was General Motors, and every GM car had either part of it or the whole car built somehow in the Flint area. So I grew up around, these auto workers, and so, around the 70s is when robotics first started helping these robots, right? And people were like, oh, all these auto workers are going to lose their jobs. The reality is they didn't, right? They didn't lose their job. But what they had to do was adapt. They had to learn to work with the robots, right? So their job before was take a door, hang it on the car, attach a couple of bolts. Now the robot would attach the door and you'd attach the bolts, or you would adjust the settings on the robot or whatever, right? And so today it's no different for knowledge workers, right? Ultimately, those of you studying computer science or software engineering or any of these fields, right? Computer information systems, it's really about how do we use these tools effectively, just like how do we use word processing or spreadsheets or any other software effectively, right? It's all about learning to work with this new set of tooling as opposed to saying these are actually going to replace human beings.
Uh, what would what is a good resume look like in terms
What
of?
does a good resume look like? That's a great question. In fact, they were just talking about it at this conference that I'm here. The biggest thing I would say is um, resumes have evolved along with the technology, right? So for a while, people were so worried about having certain buzzwords or keywords in their technology, so it'd get picked up by algorithms. But the reality is that's not effective, right? That to me, this is like the early days of the internet. So when I started my career in the mid 90s, this is before Google. There was an old-fashioned set of like search engines in the very early days of the internet. All they did was massive searches of text. So, for example, if you wanted to be the number one, let's say, grocery store, you would literally have a website that had the word grocery store repeated a million times on it, and then you would get picked up by Alta Vista or Ask.com or Lycos or Excite.com, these old websites. And then Google came along and said, this is stupid. The one who mentions the word the most shouldn't be the winner. It's the one who has the most relevant content, right? So even as far back as 98, when Google came into existence, and by the way, one of the Google founders, Larry Page, is actually from my home state of Michigan, and moved to Stanford and met the other co-founder and started it there. But they said, hey, raw data is not good enough. You have to have like meaning and context. And so they did that for websites way back in 98, 27 years ago. And so similarly now, resumes need to be contextual, right? If you shouldn't just flood your resume with every buzzword people are looking for. It should be like truly focusing on what you're doing, what you've done in the past, and what you're looking to do in the future. That's one thing people often miss on a resume is like really adding that objective, that goal, like where you're trying to go. And so that recruiters and automated systems can say, hey, we're looking for someone who's going to, do XYZ. And your resume says you're interested in XYZ, whether that XYZ is, human experiences. You're talking about Verizon. Hey, I'm interested in the next, generation of telecommunications software that can give people, a really great experience as they use their mobile phone, throughout the city or throughout the world or whatever, right? And so ultimately, a resume should tell a story. And for a while, as I said, people were trying to just flood it with buzzwords, and then they'd get their first interview, and people would ask them about those buzzwords, and it wouldn't do them any good. What you should really have is tell a story. So again, this is where you can use generative AI to say, okay, here's what I've done so far. I worked at Taco Bell in high school. I tutor in college. I have this degree. I've also taken a few classes in this area, XYZ. And then as you list those things out, you can use some of the generative AI tools to say, help me tell this story and write a resume for me, right? And then it's on you to go back and reread that and make sure that did it interpret the information you put in correctly, and is it telling the story in an accurate way? So, one big question that used to come up is someone, like I said, been in the industry almost 30 years. One big question used to come up is, should I customize my resume every time I apply to a job? And in the past, I would tell people, well, you don't need to customize it for every role, but I would say that you can, you can tweak it a bit depending on the role that you're doing, etc. Well, now I've changed that to say, you know what? It's so easy to customize that you should pretty much customize it for every role. So if you're applying to a role at Bloomberg, you should say, hey, I'm interested in financial systems. Help me rewrite my resume for financial focus, right? You're interested in Verizon for telecommunications. You're interested in LinkedIn for a professional networking site, right? So again, you should definitely be using the tools of today to make your resume tell the story that you're trying to have that hiring manager, have that recruiter, have that automated review system match to.
One page, not important. The resume should be one page and not more.
Yeah, absolutely. That those rules still apply. I always tell people if you give I mean, think of yourself when you're scrolling through social media, right? If you see a wall of text, you're not going to read the wall of text. But if you see something short and pithy and concise, that's what you're going to read. So similarly, I still firmly believe that a resume of someone who's especially like early in their career should never be more than a page. And even for someone who's been around as long as I have, I still never try to keep it to 2 pages or less. And anything that's like older or not very relevant now, I'm glad that someone's proud of something they did 20 years ago, but if it's not relevant to what's happening now or what's going to get them a job now, just keep it short and sweet, one line, and focus the content on what's actually going to help you match to what you're looking for. So yes, definitely short and sweet.
The 8,000 are distributed around the world or primarily New York?
Yeah, we have of the 8,000 engineers, about 500 of them are in New York, so definitely not primarily in New York by any means. Our two biggest engineering centers are actually in the Bay Area, South Bay in Sunnyvale, California, and in Bangalore, India. So we've got about probably, let's say, maybe 2,000 each in those two locations. So that's like maybe half of the engineering population. And then we've got, as I said, about 500 in New York, another 500 in SF itself, San Francisco, a few hundred in Seattle and random other places in Europe, etc. So, during COVID, we had much more of a remote hiring mentality the last couple of years. So we have people in a bunch of random places, but we also have a few kind of pockets of high concentration. When I first joined LinkedIn, we only had about 100 engineers locally. So I've been focusing actually on growing the New York office from an engineering perspective. We've always had a large office. It was 1,000 when I joined. Now it's 2,000 locally, but it was a tiny engineering presence when I joined. Now it's 5x what it was, 7 years ago, but I still want to grow it more.
Yeah, I read that created about LinkedIn is, how old is LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is 22 years old as of this year.
Amazing growth.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's funny because when it was first started, that was right around the time Facebook had started. MySpace was still popular, and everyone was doubtful that a professional networking site would take off or people would be interested. And yet it's shown more strength and more sustainability than any of those other sites. Those other sites have ebbed and flowed. You look at Facebook right now. I mean, as of the students in here, I doubt many of them are very active on Facebook if they even have a Facebook account. Generally, Facebook tend to be between my generation and yours, and people who are older who are on Facebook these days. Whereas Instagram, especially Snapchat, TikTok, etc. So many of these sites come and go. Certainly, LinkedIn has sustained itself in its niche of being professional networking. And really, there are some other sites around the world that do it locally. Like there's a big one in Germany, a big one in India. But ultimately, there's no global professional networking site like LinkedIn, other than LinkedIn.
If people have projects, it's important that they be in GitHub or the equivalent.
Yeah, so as you may know, LinkedIn is actually owned by Microsoft. It was purchased by Microsoft about a year before I joined, about eight plus years ago. We still operate completely independently. Microsoft leaves us alone to, we're a successful company. Microsoft leaves us alone to be successful. GitHub is also, by the way, owned by Microsoft. And so we used to have multiple source control systems when I first joined 7 years ago. But over time, as much of the industry has standardized on GitHub as a methodology that they like, similarly, GitHub is our source control process. It's built into our continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD process. It's built into our automated unit tests and integration tests. It's built into every framework, and now actually it's built into our development tools as well. There's a thing called GitHub Copilot, which has like a lot of ability to help you review code. It does something called linting, which some of the people here may not be familiar with, which takes your code and standardizes the format so that if 10 different people write code with slight differences in format, it standardizes them in terms of spacing and how documentation is, inline documentation is, etc. But yeah, it's pretty much become an industry-wide standard that GitHub is the methodology for source control and for that entire life cycle.
Documentation, that's often an important part of coding, not necessarily in college. It should be, but people are spending a lot of time doing other things. I'm opening up to anyone with a question.
I have a question with our project and portfolio. A question that like when you're reviewing some portfolio and GitHub or anything that's been shared with you, an employer, what else project stand out?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we do encourage as part of the interview process for people to take a look at public GitHubs. One thing that I really love, and it's also something I love about LinkedIn, and this is not true of other tech companies, right? Is LinkedIn contributes and uses a lot of open source, right? So, for example, the number one data streaming service in the world is a thing called Kafka. It's an open source project. Some of you may have heard of it. There's a derivative project from it called SAMZA. So if you go to the Apache, which is one of the largest, open source systems out there, and so when it comes to early career people, when it comes to people who are doing a lot of independent work, I tell them, look, if you want something notable, like you could be at a startup that maybe is secret or you can't share what you're doing, but you can always contribute to an open source code base, right? You can always say, hey, I found a bug in this open source thing I was using. And so open source to me is such a phenomenal aspect of and it's kind of unique, right? Like I got a sister who works in Hollywood, right? Yes, there is such a thing as public domain when it comes to movies and TV, but the reality is hardly anybody watches like public domain content. It's really not like a major player in the industry. Whereas open source really like all the major cloud internet providers out there, whether you talk about Google Cloud, you talk about Azure, you talk about AWS, right? Amazon Web Services, they all rely like so heavily on open source as the major contribution of software that runs their databases, that runs their network software, that runs their application servers, that runs their serverless configuration, their container-based like Dockers, all kinds of stuff is based on open source. And so I always tell people, look, you want to show something cool in your GitHub portfolio, in your contributions, and by the way, you should link to it from your resume if you've got if you are someone who does have a meaningful GitHub portfolio to show, public one. But you can always go to an open source project. You can always find like, hey, they've got a bunch of bugs that I could just fix, and then that's one way of showing that you're giving back to the community. You're working on a large scale code base. You're doing things that you may not have an opportunity to do if you're not actually in a big tech company.
Question over here.
All right, thank you very much for your answers. I wanted to ask Mr. Hunter, given that LinkedIn is developing a startup that's centered around generative artificial intelligence, I want to ask that how likely is it that artificial intelligence engineering will become a far more demanding skill that many programs aim to strive for, and will it have the chances to receive software engineering?
Yeah. As I said earlier, there's two aspects of artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? There's learning the actual development of machine learning models, all that stuff. That was really a big deal, I would say, from around, let's say, 2015 until a couple of years ago, right? LinkedIn, we invested a lot internally to cross-train people. Maybe someone was primarily a web developer or a mobile developer or a back-end developer, right? We did a lot to cross-train them and say, learn about fundamental AI models, et cetera. So that is definitely an area of interest that, it's still in demand, it's still being hired, but it's no longer being hired as much because now people are focusing much more on leveraging AI that exists as opposed to building new models, right? So, for example, if you want to work at OpenAI and work on, GPT-6 or whatever the next, we've had GPT-2, 3, 4, and now there's 4.0, there's 4.1, there's 5.0, there's all these different models. If you want to work on fundamental models, there's still some of that work going on. But the reality is learning to use, as I said, LLMs, learning to use things like Cursor or Windsurf or, as I mentioned, Glean or Copilot or Gemini or, just ChatGPT itself, learning to use these things as part of your process of taking an idea and making that idea into a working solution, a working code solution, that's actually the more powerful thing that everybody's looking for today. There's a term we use at LinkedIn, and it's not just us using it. We call it AI native, meaning people who have been like for example, when I first started coding, and I'm sure Ted will remember this in those days too. COBOL was a very big language, right? Like lots and lots of mainframe stuff, people using COBOL, et cetera, right? And then Java was a brand new language when I was in college, and I learned Java right off the bat. And now for the last 25 years plus years, Java became the dominant language when it comes to backend systems, right? There's still a little bit of COBOL out there. Well, similarly, for those of us who've been doing Java for a long time, switching from like just straight up Java coding to say, how do I actually use GitHub Copilot? How do I actually use Cursor or Windsurf or some of these tools effectively? Again, not just ask them to write code for me and assume it's good. No, but effectively partnering with these coding tools and really being so comfortable with them that you're able to like, hey, this tool comes naturally to me. I'm able to do this, as opposed to retraining someone like myself who's been in the industry for a very long time. So, being that AI native person where these tools are just second nature to you, you're able to use these tools effectively. Again, not to do your work for you, but to partner with the tool. Just like I was talking about earlier, the auto worker partnering with the robot. Similarly, you learning to partner with these tools is what's going to make you the most attractive, job wise, skill wise, because that's where the industry is going. They're looking for people who are really just so comfortable saying, I'm going to, write, 10x the code of someone like myself used to write because I'm able to use these tools to generate a lot of the busy work, code review that busy work, enhance it, fix it, make it work, go forward, etc.
So, given that startup, what's the goal primarily for perhaps you?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Can you speak up a little bit?
What would be the goal between you and LinkedIn in regards to developing the startup for general artificial intelligence?
In regards to developing what? Sorry.
Artificial intelligence generator.
Uh, I think it's not picking you up because you're to the side of the room, and it's like Zoom has this thing where it picks up people in the side. But Sarah, if you want to repeat it, go ahead.
Did you hear the last part?
Salwa, Salwa. Sorry, not Sarah. Salwa.
Okay, generative artificial intelligence was the last thing.
So what's the goal? I mean, the goal is to do the same things we've always done, right? Build software, sophisticated software to do the things we need to do. So to go back to what Ted was saying earlier, right? If you work at Verizon, you're trying to build software that runs that company as effectively as possible. Everything from the software that provides customer support, customers to sign up, marketing software, sales software, and then if you're an active customer, like onboarding the customer, getting their SIM to work with the phone network, etc. The actual software that runs the telecommunications network, the support website, the billing website, like nothing has changed in that regard, right? So whatever the core business is of a business, right? So if you're Bloomberg, right? Bloomberg's got their financial side, they've got their news side. That core business hasn't changed. For LinkedIn, we have like 5 core businesses, right? We have the recruiter business where people buy a recruiter product on LinkedIn so they can search LinkedIn as a recruiter more effectively than just a regular person searching on LinkedIn, right? We also have a thing called Sales Navigator where if I'm a salesperson and I'm looking for customers, like for example, let's say I sell college textbooks, right? Well, I want to go on, I want to go on LinkedIn and use Sales Navigator to find who would be the people interested in buying large quantities of college textbooks, right? That would be like college bookstores, that would be like large websites who sell college textbooks, that would be like, different student organizations or whatever who might want to get, bulk discount textbooks for students, et cetera, right? So that's what Sales Navigator is. We also have our premium product, which is a for regular people who just want to have extra features on LinkedIn. We have our LinkedIn Learning product, which is a whole bunch of curated.
Let me get- What? Oh, not here, answering. What did you suggest? Oh, hold on. Oh, he got it. And maybe it's on his end, not ours. Okay. Welcome back. Welcome back.
We lost you for a while.
Sorry about that. I lost my connection somehow.
Okay.
So yeah, yep. So as I was saying, everyone has been using software to run their business for quite a long time, right? The college uses it for, enrolling people in class, for tuition payments, for everything else. So the core mission of using software to run businesses, to run institutions, all of that hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is what happened? Are you guys still there? Okay. I lost you for a second again, but now I did. I guess you didn't lose me, but I lost you. Okay, I'm good now. All right. So yeah, the core business of using software to make various processes, right? Whether again enrolling in classes, whatever business any institution or organization or government entity or anything is in hasn't changed. The only difference is every software engineer out there now is going to be expected to use these tools in their development process, in their design process, in their user acceptance process, et cetera.
I got a question about, right, so we've seen a trend where so many different industries are beginning to rely pretty heavily on AI tools to expand what they can do, or like you said, like automate things that otherwise would have been kind of repetitive tasks. If it ends up being that tech is in a bubble and a lot of these tools kind of collapse, and not all of them, but let's say you rely on some AI tools that the company holds, is LinkedIn in a position to deal with a situation where suddenly some of the tools have not been, can no longer access them?
Yeah, so I don't think the tools are going anywhere. There is an AI bubble, there's no doubt about it. But the bubble is like a stock market thing, a investor thing. It's not a technology thing. And what I mean by that is like when the bubble happened in the dot-com days early in my career, I was about 5 or 6 years into my career, and then the dot-com bubble happened, right? It was because people were putting in money, investors were putting money into businesses that weren't making money, right? Like if an investor puts money into a business or a startup, they expect to get money back, and the companies eventually make a lot of money. And that just wasn't happening in the dot-com days. And similarly, in the 2008 financial crisis, a lot of people were over investing in housing. They were over investing in financial institutions. All these subprime mortgages and all this other stuff was happening, right? A couple of years back, even after COVID, there was the crypto bubble, right? Where people were investing too much in crypto. Does that mean blockchain is a failed technology? No, blockchain is a very successful technology. It's an awesome technology. I'll tell you a quick story, actually. So I assume most of you know what NFTs are, right? Non-fungible tokens. It's a unique digital asset, right? Well, way back in like '05, I was working at one company, but me and a bunch of friends said, hey, we have this idea, we called it a limited edition digital collectible, right? We said we want to do this like unique, basically you can call it an NFT today, right? So we had the idea, we coded it up as a side startup while we were doing our main job. We were very unsuccessful coding it up. We weren't smart enough to invent blockchain as a technology, right? Blockchain was actually invented in '09. I'm talking about like '05, like we were like 4 years too early. So we had the idea. Blockchain came into existence. Like by then, we had already failed as a startup, and that was fine. Like I said, it was just a side gig. None of us were living off of that startup, but we invested a lot of our time and personal money in it, and we really were excited about it. And sure enough, it became a big reality over the next 10 years. And we're proud of the fact that we thought of the idea first, even if we couldn't make it a reality, right? And so the generative AI technologies are real. They are truly there, right? They are producing productivity improvements. Are they producing 80% productivity improvements? No, probably it's like for any person's job, they're probably going to make you 10 or 20% more effective than you used to be, right? So if you used to be able to produce, let's say, an average of 150 lines of code a day, maybe you'll do 250 lines of code a day or 175 lines of code a day, whatever, some number more than you used to do, right? But ultimately, it's not, and again, this is a law of averages. Yes, you can generate prototypes super fast now with tools like Lovable or Vercel V0 or some of these vibe coding tools. But does that make a real app? No, you still have to do all the plumbing, all the security, all the infrastructure, all the kind of phishing protections and everything else you have to do to make a real app that works in the real world, right? And so ultimately the bubble will burst. I do believe there's a bubble, right? The bubble is investors are saying, hey, so much good stuff is happening here. We're going to throw a bunch of money at these companies. Not all of these companies will survive. Some of these companies still haven't figured out how to sell their product and make money, right? Some companies, they're getting way more money than they'll ever earn. That's just the nature of a bubble, right? And so yeah, a lot of the companies that are doing this stuff, they will no longer exist in a few years, and those investors will lose their money, and then the stock market part of it will crash. Hopefully, it doesn't crash the whole economy. Hopefully, it doesn't cause massive layoffs across the whole world, as happened in '08 and in the COVID Great Recession timeframe as well and whatnot, right? And so really. The bubble exists. It doesn't mean the technology isn't real. It just means that people are over investing in certain companies that are bound to fail or don't have good business models.
Here's a good question. Uh, we've been talking only about using generative AI LLMs for coding, but there's a bigger space that that people can profit from using them, even coders, more than coding. That must be important, but I don't know where.
Oh yeah. I mean, I just attended a talk at this conference that I'm in, where someone said, what is generative AI really doing? It's democratizing the production side, right? So if you work in Hollywood and before to film something, to animate something would take you so much effort, but now the tools can actually help you do that faster, right? Like for example, as a coder, right? So I'm in management now. I don't code actively on a daily basis. But as a coder, I've always been really good at the back end of coding, APIs, big data pipelines, all that database stuff, et cetera. I've never been a very good UI coder, right? Like every time I've had an idea, I'm like, oh, I'll do a hackathon. I'll come up with this great idea. And I will create the ugliest user interface you've ever seen, right? Because I'm just not a creative person, right? It'll have the necessary form fields, it'll have the necessary buttons, it'll get the job done, but it's just ugly as hell. And that's just my poor aesthetic ability. But now the tools will let me create a really beautiful UI, all right, whether it's mobile, whether it's web, whether it's voice interaction, whether it's video interaction, whether it's chat interaction, it will let me create these tools, And so it's filling in the gap in my ability to be a coder in a particular way, right? And it's also filling in people's gap. One very powerful aspect is, by the way, I'm proud of the fact that when I work in the CUNY schools, right, such a huge percentage of our students are first generation college students. Many of them are first generation Americans, right? And many of them are coming from homes like I grew up with English as not the first language, right? My parents spoke Arabic at home because they barely knew English when I was a kid, right? And so at the end of the day, being able to cross language barriers or skill gaps or of all kinds. It's not just hey, it helps you code. No, it helps you. Like you may be good at one aspect of coding or another. You may be good at one aspect of writing or another, one aspect of content creation or another, and it can help close those gaps to the areas that you're less familiar with. Again, you're still responsible for what happens, right? So if you create something and it creates a hole in the UI because you're a bad UI coder like I am, that's still my responsibility that I put out an app that has a hole in the UI, right? And so ultimately, it's helping fill the gaps in skills that again, because it's really good at the human communication. If you tell a prompt, I want you to help me code this UI thing or this backend thing or this mobile thing or whatever you're doing, it's going to help you get started a lot faster than the old integrated development environments, IDEs, would help you with.
Have to get away with it. I know you're a very creative person. Maybe not in UI, definitely.
Well, I mean, I'm definitely someone. I mean, I believe, one of the oldest debates is what do people call themselves? Do they call themselves a programmer? Do they call themselves a developer? Do they call themselves an engineer? And I always emphasize the word engineer because an engineer really thinks about the whole problem in front of them. They try to understand what am I trying to solve, right? Am I trying to solve, just like, hey, I'm going to create a screen that does this or that? No, I'm trying to solve how does the company I work for bill the customer in an effective way with the least pain as possible? How do you get that credit card number or whatever payment methodology? How do you transact that with as least user pain as possible, right? So I love the engineering aspect, the engineering mentality, that whole like taking a problem, grappling with that problem, finding solutions, considering all the alternatives, understanding the environment that you're in. And as software engineers, we have a lot more flexibility than other engineers, right? If you're a civil engineer, you can't start by building a prototype of the bridge that you're starting and then let it fall into the water and then build another one. But in software, you can iterate much more easily than you can in civil or electrical or mechanical engineering. And the reason I don't like those other words is, to me, a programmer is literally someone saying, you give me a bunch of information, I'm just going to program it in. I'm not going to actually think about it too much. Or if you're a developer, you're taking someone else's idea and you're developing it. But the reality is, I like to be an engineer. I like to take the idea and really get to the why am I doing this? Why am I thinking about why am I doing this? Like what's the right solution? What's the real problem I'm dealing with, et cetera? And then grappling, finding technology solutions and making those effective. That's why I love being an engineer. It's very creative, for sure.
I would appreciate you hiring. It would, I don't know that LinkedIn goes around with colleges.
I mean, it's always been part of our LinkedIn mission to give opportunities wherever we can. Generally, LinkedIn's not been a very popular app for people in college, except for at the very end of their college career when they're like, "Hey, I got to get a job. I better create a LinkedIn profile." It's basically an online resume. That's how people would describe it, right? And then move forward. But like, there's a session we call it Rock Your Profile. It's actually a thing I've done. I've done it in the college system. I've done it in high schools. I've done it with underemployed communities. I've done it with like people with different challenges, whether disabilities or whatnot. I'm always encouraging people to help them with resume reviews, help them with career opportunities. I mean, one thing again I love about LinkedIn compared to some of my previous employers, we like to do good in the world while we do well. Like sure, we want to do well as a company, but we want to do good in the world, right? And our mission as a company is to help every member of the of the globe have economic and educational opportunities. So again, we're gonna only achieve that if we reach out to people where they are and help them connect to resources. Again, educational, academic, and especially employment.
have
Any other?
people
Yeah.
online, is there a second interview? So they get past the resume reading. Is there a technical interview that follows?
Yeah, generally most companies in tech, and this includes startups, have like a three-phase approach. Phase number one is what they call the recruiter phone screen, where the recruiter will say, "Hey, I looked at your resume. I want to talk to you." They want to understand, like, "Hey, tell me more about this or that aspect of your resume." They want to vet that what's on the resume really reflects the reality of the person, etc. Then they have the next stage is usually called the technical phone screen. So I do a bunch of these. So the technical phone screen is let's actually talk about the technology that you've done, maybe do a little bit of a technical problem, a small scale technical problem, et cetera, and really understand the candidate. Are they an initial good match, et cetera? And then you do what they call the technical loop or the full interview loop or the full interview day or whatever you want to call it. And it's generally around 5 or 6 hours of interviews, like usually anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour each interview. And you'll go through a series of both, technical, but also behavioral interviews to say, because like, for example, at LinkedIn, we have a philosophy of hiring people who are, positive in their approach, right? We don't want to hire people who are focusing on tearing others down to get the job done, right? Like we want people who are ethical. We want people who have the right kind of cooperative, collaborative approach to engineering and to every other aspect of the job. And so ultimately, most of the industry does similar things. We focus much more on culture at LinkedIn because we have such a positive culture internally. We want people who want to, again, not only do well, but also do good in the world, who believe in the mission of the company, who really, want to make a positive impact on the planet while also earning their living. And so that's not true at other companies I've worked at. Other companies, they would hire people if they were technically skilled, no matter how much of a jerk they are, right? I mean, they really didn't focus on purely, like focus purely on technical ability above all else. And I personally didn't enjoy that very much because if you hire someone who's really self-interested and not interested in helping the people around them, it's going to make for a toxic workplace as opposed to a collaborative and cooperative workplace.
Helpful to add on your resume actually too. Work like nonprofit clubs, working with other people in a positive way to help society.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. I always tell people, I tell this to my students at City College as well. None of us study technical things in order to, communicate with humans as our main thing. But the reality is, we spend so much of our time just communicating with our fellow humans, whether that's emailing, whether that's sending them Slack or Discord messages, whether that's texting, whether that's sitting in meeting rooms together. And so, ultimately, every job is about interacting with your fellow humans effectively while you do the technical work required of the job. And so, yeah, showing people that you are a positive, collaborative person who's helping others, not just doing your own work, but also like really uplifting the entire team, having a good time together. One of our other company values is relationships matter, right? We want people to have great relationships in LinkedIn, just like we want them to have great relationships on LinkedIn, working, using the platform.
A little bit early.
I actually have a question.
You do.
Yeah, I have a question for the students. I'm sure they would love to know this. So if you were able to,
Thank you very much for all
if
your
you were,
time and effort. We all really appreciate it. I know he's involved in other things.
yeah.
Like Kiely Tech Rep of the college teaching.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Salwa. What's your other question?
My question is, if you could advise your past college student self, what would you tell them?
It's funny because I studied computer science before anyone thought you'd make a lot of money in computer science, right? So when I studied computer science, from 93 to 96, I graduated college young, 3 years. But my parents had no idea what technology was. Like my dad, God rest his soul, was a doctor. My mom was a school teacher, and they just saw me as a guy who, like, hey, among their 8 kids, I was the one that like not only wanted to play computer games, but also wanted to kind of figure out how the computer worked. I also took apart the toaster, the TV, the vacuum, anything. Like I was always into like trying to understand things and whatnot. And so, I guess the one thing I would say is if I could look back and I knew what I know now about the industry, I would have focused more on like um, not only learning the technical skills, but learning how to turn. Because like I said, when I graduated in '96, literally no one thought you'd make a huge amount of money studying computer science. It was just like, hey, you'll be just like any other engineer. You'll make $50,000 a year, and that's great. That's wonderful. You're not going to make multiple six figures by any means, or even a single six figures, And so ultimately, I would say if I had the foresight of knowing what I know now, I would say, take some of those ideas I had and push them to fruition. Like I had lots of startup ideas in my early days. I was a bit nervous about like, hey, I better make a living. I also got married super young, had a family super young. By the time I was 22, I was married, had a kid less than a year later. 2 years later, another kid. 2 years later, another kid. So I was a very young dad, and now I'm a very young dad of older kids. So I'm still in my 40s. My kids are almost 27, 24, and 21. And one of them just got married. So so in any case, yeah, I guess, the biggest thing I would say is I would have pushed myself not only to learn the technical skills, but also to go ahead and learn the full like life cycle of taking ideas from idea all the way to reality sooner. Because I've done a lot of side startups. I've done a lot of stuff throughout my career. I've also done startup, like half my career is roughly big tech. The other half is roughly, startups. And like I've done a lot of really cool stuff. But in those early, like I literally could have started the Yahoo or Amazon back in those days. But most of the people who started them, they had like 5 or 10 years on me in terms of career, because they not only were just starting their career at that time, but they had seen how to make things happen and whatnot. So I was, again, I'm not excusing anything by any means. I mean, I've, alhamdulillah, thank God, I've been very, fortunate in my career. But if I pushed myself a bit harder in those early startups, I could have made something more out of them. I'm
They
sorry,
believe,
I couldn't hear you. So speak
they
up.
should, they should believe in themselves and what they're capable of doing. Right?
Absolutely. Everyone is capable of everything, especially with the tooling these days, right? I mean, if you have an idea, chase it, work on it. Don't ever give up. Don't ever limit yourself. Other people are going to try to limit you. Don't ever limit yourself.
Any struggles or boulders or things that you feel like stopped you from fulfilling what you wanted to do in your early career?
I wouldn't say early career, but I'd say more middle career about 10, 15 years ago. And unfortunately, it's very true today. There is discrimination, there is harassment, there is mistreatment in the industry, right? And like specifically, I'll just be a little bit bold here and say, the last couple of years, there's been people who have been protesting. I believe in the First Amendment. I believe in people should protest whatever important issues exist in their life, right? And they should not face harassment. They should not face career issues, et cetera. So unfortunately, we're in an era right now where the government is not supportive of protecting minority rights or anything, right? So I think it's something that I'm very concerned about, but I do believe that technology is enabling us to get around that situation, right? And in the past, like my parents came from Syria, and for the longest time, Syria was a military dictatorship where if you spoke the littlest thing that was perceived as anti-government, you were immediately locked away, your family was taken away, et cetera, right? And so like people are afraid sometimes to speak their mind, but I think technology is an equalizing force. I think it is a democratizing force. I think our tools are helping us to have that freedom of speech that is part of fundamental to us as Americans. And so ultimately, I think that we should continue to push the technology platforms. And by the way, I mean, if we're seeing that certain platform owners are super toxic in their attack on, communities and stuff like that, then we should stop using their products. Like there's nothing wrong with boycotting or stopping using products of people who are, mistreating others, right? And so like we shouldn't feel like we have to use something just because others are on it. We should create our own platforms, our own voices, etc.
Another thing is, I understand some of these students, like, this is a 2-year program for STEM scholars. And what do you suggest to them to be focusing on, or any outside opportunities, internships, whatever it is, volunteer work, experiences? What do you suggest that they do in their last semester or two before they venture out into the real world, let's say?
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say is don't just do your classwork. Do your classwork well, but don't just do your classwork, right? Do a hackathon, do a coding competition. If you have a friend who's doing a startup, go, just contribute and to that startup a little bit. Like give yourself an opportunity to see beyond your classroom. And again, that could be, hey, I have an idea. I'm just going to go quickly code it up in Cursor and Lovable or one of these tools, right? And just play around with it, right? Like again, if you limit yourself just to the academic side, you're going to miss the bigger world of what's happening around you. And by the way, I ask that question very frequently of early stage career people when I interview them. I say, "What have you done beyond the classroom? I mean, I'm glad you got all A's. That's great. I want people who are high achievers. But what have you done beyond that?" And that's something I always encourage people is don't limit yourself. I mean, we all know the like if you're calling Spectrum for internet problems, you know how painful that can be, or Xfinity or any of these companies, right? So we know how technology is not working well. We know how customer service or the different parts of life we deal with, the power company, the credit card company, the bank, the insurance company, the grocery store, all these things we deal with. We know what works well, we know what doesn't work well. Use your technical abilities to kind of come up with ideas. Again, you don't have to turn it into a startup, but just play around and use the technology to actually be that creative engineer that's solving things in the world.
That's really useful. Does anyone have any questions, or doesn't even have to be a question? Anything that
Well, I'll just say this. If you look for me on LinkedIn, you can see my spelling of my name right on the screen there, Abdullah Haidar. So if you look for me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to connect with all of you on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat further, answer questions. Again, I love to help. College students in the city and beyond, in move forward to their career, move forward with a startup idea, move forward in any aspect where I can help. All right. Well, thank you again, Sadwa. I don't know if Ted left, but thank Ted for me. And oh, he's right there. Okay. Well, thank you to everybody, and appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. He's already gone. He's like, goodbye. So I'm gonna actually stop you for a moment. How did you feel about this event? Was it good? Would you like more?